Glyphs presents State of Glyphs by Georg Seifert and Rainer Erich Scheichenbauer.
Nice to be back in Bangkok. Nice to be back at BITS. Great to see you all. Before I start going through the most recent developments of everybody's favorite font editor, who of you has been making fonts, or at least one font? No matter, okay, all right. All right, Ben, you cannot chicken out of this one. Okay, who of you have been using Glyphs? Oh, there's almost a 100% overlap between these groups. Okay, so we'll see. I'll talk about the latest developments in Glyphs, what's been added recently to our font editor, and I'm going through some of the newest features that we have. Number one, we did a lot for improving the workflow of variable fonts recently. There's a couple of things that were really hard to implement, but now you can do it. For instance, you can use masked objects, masked shapes, for variable font production. So here, for instance, is like how you could do a C, for instance, by masking off that right part. And this now works in variable font export, provided that what you do in all masters produces a still compatible outline, which is a bit of a stretch sometimes, but it does work. Another thing you can do for variable fonts, you can use strokes. You can use open outlines, add a stroke expansion to it, add certain finials to it, and then in most cases, if you manage to make it stay compatible, which it usually does, you can export this as a variable font. Another thing that has been asked a lot and that was really, really difficult to implement, but to some extent you can do it now, is apply custom parameters. Now, if you're not familiar with custom parameters, is basically a post-production step, right? It's something that you add to your font after interpolation. Now, the problem is, in a variable font, there is no such thing as after interpolation. It's always interpolating. So whatever you do in terms of adding a custom parameter, you have to keep it compatible as well. And the way to do it, for instance, let's take one example. We want rounded fonts. And of course, you want to round your font differently in a lighter master and from a bolder master, right? You want to have a different radius. What you can do in Glyphs is you can add something called a number value, which is a value that you define in font info in the master setup. You can define a different value for each master. And then you can reference that value as a variable inside your custom parameter and inside a variable font setup. And the one thing, of course, it's a variable font, so it keeps all its overlap. The one thing you have to deal with is that, of course, we are also rounding the nodes inside the overlap. So you have to be careful that your radius doesn't look out of the overlap. It works now. You can use custom parameters in variable font exports, provided the change they make to the outline in each master keeps the shapes master compatible. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, but you can do it. Oh, another thing that was a big issue in variable font production is that, of course, we make these great designs and many, many masters. It's a width and a weight axis, most popular one. We want to export static fonts, a static font family from that, because let's face it, these are the ones that still sell the best, and that keep the bread and butter. Keep the butter on our bread, right? That's the expression. But of course, we want to export the variable font. Now the problem is, imagine the scenario: you have a weight and a width axis, right? And for a static font, you might split the different widths into different families. So you have my font condensed, my font normal, or my font expanded, for instance. And then in between those, you get the weight, right? Light, regular, medium, semi-bold, etc. Now, in a variable font, you'd have both axes combined, right? And that means that you have a different setup for your style names, right? And whereas the style name is semi-bold for the static condensed family, right? It has to be condensed semi-bold for the variable font. And you can put both now in the same export. And sometimes we now officialized some little tricks that have been there all the time along, but we only recently put them into the user interface. For instance, the trick that was available if you used the round corners filter on as a custom parameter, you could use negative radiuses for rounding inside corners. You see that in the E. I use it, and now it's available in the user interface as well. So you can officially round negatively, or combine them both. You have a different radius on the inside and on the outside. All the filters, you call the filter and or you call it from the menu, and then you experiment with the values, and then you usually want to use them non-destructively. So you would copy that as a filter parameter. But occasionally, you don't want it as a filter, but as a so-called pre-filter. Now, many of you, I guess, do not know what a pre-filter is. Pre-filter is the same as a filter, but it is applied at an earlier stage of the production process, especially before overlap removal if you have a static font export. So you can now also copy the pre-filter parameter, and you don't need to change it manually or something. It has been coming up a lot recently. Some designers are very, very nerdy about their glyph order, right? I understand it to a certain extent because it controls the appearance of your font inside the Adobe glyph palettes. So you want that in a certain order. You don't want the default order that Glyphs gives you. But, if you do, Glyphs, there's the glyph order parameter. This is nothing new. This has been around all the time. Yeah? And people have been using that, in my opinion, overusing it, but okay. They've been using it and been happy about it, except recently we've gotten repeatedly complaints about, wait a minute, the glyph order parameter is not working because we actually, under the hood, secretly reordered 2 glyphs. So we always start with not def and space. And which is also according to the OpenType recommendation. This is how we're supposed to do it. That's why we, even if you try to try to put in a different glyph order, we always reorder not def and space to the beginning. And if you know what you're doing, there's the very secret parameter keep glyph order. So you can even overrule that or override that. Why is it secret? It doesn't show up in the interface. So you cannot. It doesn't show up in the list, and you're not supposed to use this. Okay. So, but I know it's been coming up recently. We had like 5, 6 people who not. Oh, no, I need it that way. Okay. Now you can. We've built a lot of little tricks into little refinements into the workflow. You may be aware of matrix keys. So, for instance, you have a lowercase h, which on the right side should be exactly the same as a lowercase n. So you write equals n on the right side bearing of the lowercase h. And you can always resync the side bearing of the h to the n, etc., etc. Now, what you can do now in Glyphs is a so-called self-referential matrix key with a double equal sign. Why would you do that? Because that's always the case, right? An n here, for instance, is always the same as an n. Now, the thing is, this disables metric alignment for a certain master. So if let's say this matrix key works well for the light and the bold, but also the bold condensed, but maybe not for the light condensed. Yeah? There you need, you want to place it freely, then you can use a double equals self-referential matrix key. We've recently been adding new scripts. The scripts have been around for a while, but we've been adding better support for them in Glyphs. Especially adding them to the sidebar. If you're working on a script that is not in the sidebar yet, we are very happy to receive your input. Sometimes we get something like, why is YesCD, that was a recent one, why is YesCD not there yet? Yes, because we don't know much about YesCD ourselves, but we can implement it if you give us your input, because you're an expert at it, we are not, right? So much of the sidebar that you know in Glyphs is a community project. Yeah? Many of you have contributed to it already, and please continue to do so. If you think something is missing, something's wrong, it can be changed very, very quickly, very easily. A few more little tricks that we have. We snuck a lot of all masters options into the functions of Glyphs. One of them is if you option delete a kerning group, except of just deleting it, You delete the current pair in all masters at the same time. And holding down Option gives you a lot of all masters variations for all kinds of menu items, etc. Here's another thing that we've implemented recently, and I think that can make a difference for scripts that rely heavily on mark-to-mark and mark-to-base attachments. It's all about placing anchors, right? And you press Command-U, and it puts in the default anchors, and then they're never exactly where they have to be, right? They're always one funny example was the center anchor in the uppercase H. It was always too low, always colliding with the crossbar. This is exactly where you didn't need it. But now when you do that in the uppercase H, the center anchor comes out on top of the crossbar. How did we manage that? Well, you can add some math to the calculation of anchor positions. It's actually pretty easy. Here, for instance, this is now default inside of the glyph data. We have the center anchor, and you add an @ sign, and then there are some variables that are predefined, like max y, the top of the bounding box of the glyph, and times 57%. So it will be on the height at 75% of the height of the H. Plus, you can move it horizontally and vertically, both is possible. So you have better default positions, and sometimes it's good enough you don't need to move it anymore. More little tricks. This has been requested a lot, and we've added it finally. When you copy glyph names, lists of glyph names, you can now also copy the production names, which is very important for the people who use FontMake, because they often, or UFO workflow, because very often, once you enter different workflow, you work with the production names and not with the names inside of the glyphs file. So the way or the names that the glyphs get after you export the font in the exported font, the production names. It's been mentioned before today already, so we added lots of new filter options. I remember last time I talked about these filtering options in font view. I think that was like 3 years ago. I think that pop-up menu was only half as big, and we keep adding new options to it. Plus also something at the very bottom, you have a custom option where you can define your own filter. But it's a little bit more complicated. If you want to do, please let us know. We'll show you how. And the most recent ones is invalid matrix keys. So you can validate your matrix keys with one click. Many other options. Many other new little improvements. We are just scraping the surface here. It's like we're not really. There's hundreds of little things. I just give you 4 quick ones. Something that we never thought of, but it's come up recently thanks to your input. Is like, why can't we reorder categories in the sample text? Yeah, now you can. We never thought of that. And thanks to your input, we realized there was a need for that. Another thing, this was actually something that was bugging me, and I kept bugging Georg until he changed that. And at the bottom of your view menu, where you can choose between the different windows, right? And you have your font info window and your font window open at the same time. And of course, both had the same name. They're both called like your font, right? And so you used to have to guess which one was the font info window and which one was the thing. No more. Now it says font info. You can access it directly. Don't need to guess. Or in the start window, where it shows you most recent fonts, you can directly access the font file in the Finder, or you can remove it from the recent ones in case you're going to present in front of a crowd and you have an NDA font in your most recent files. In shortcuts, you've mentioned shortcuts before. We recently added a bunch of options. You used to be able to define new shortcuts for menu items, but we've gone way beyond that. Many of the transformation options, like scale up or rotation or slanting, etc., is available with shortcuts. So if you find yourself using that a lot, you don't need to switch between keyboard and mouse that much anymore. All right, plus Glyphs is not just a font editor, it's also a community. We mentioned that already. Much of the content in Glyphs is thanks to your input. Of course, all the additions, like the extensions you can have. There's so many more designers and who learned how to code some basic Python, and many foundries published their script collections on GitHub, and they're now part of the plugin manager, right? So you can directly access them. And I see some of the people who provided something here in the audience today. And the very large percentage of it is open source and free to use. So it's amazing that we have. I give you 3 recent examples. Just a couple of weeks ago, Rafael Buchner released his text sequencer, which can generate tests, spacing and kerning strings for you, right? Where you can, it's basically a plugin for the sidebar. You type any text in there, and then you say, oh, I want something that's between all the letters, something that's at the beginning, something that's at the end, and you can get a complete spacing string in a matter of seconds. And it's free and available for everyone in Plugin Manager. Or Zuyan Yin's Shubapamafo. I've been told this has been asked for a lot because, let's face it, the glyph names for Chinese characters or CGK characters, they're not always very intuitive, especially if they're called UNI 423A or something, right? Which one was that again? Now, when you step through it, you get the Popomofo pronunciation. So, and as an alternative for the glyph naming, right? Again, just added, I think last week, to the plugin manager, free for everyone to use. Another one that one of our coders, Florian, just announced, I think last week, or published last week, is called Light Table, which basically, if you're working in a Git environment or in a versioning system, this gives you a visual way of committing and pushing and seeing the changes that you've made, right? I understand Git has been kind of a black box for many designers, right? Because, well, it's all text-based, and you see all your changes represented suddenly with numbers and text and stuff, and now you get a visual representation. You see exactly what's been happening. And another one that I did, like I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, was one called Realign Handles for a very basic way of tackling interpolation kinks. So if you've been interpolating, you know that sometimes 3 dots or three nodes or handles and are in line in one master, in the light master, and they're also in line in the bold master, but somehow in interpolation in between, they form a corner. Now this is called a kink, and this can now be automatically fixed in static font exports, and that's what Realign Handles is all about. And again, available for free for anyone to use. I'm wrapping up a few things we've also done in the last couple of months. I've been rewriting some of the tutorials. One of them is the corner component tutorial, which shows some advanced options also. If you've been using corner components and you don't know that I rewrote it a couple of months ago, please give it a reread. I realized there was no tutorial about intermediate layers. They're only about brace layers as they were in Glyphs 2. There's a very old tutorial, so I finally added that one, that missing link. And this one's been hugely popular. I don't know why. Make your font work in Windows. Speaking of documentation, we are about to move our handbook. Remember the PDF download we've been doing? You don't need to do that anymore. Just keep that link for handbook.glyphsapp.com. You always get the latest version of the handbook. So you don't need to, the whole PDF making process, we've streamlined the heck out of it, but you know, as a website, it's still more accessible and searchable. Thank you very much. One last thing, if you've been following us on Twitter, maybe these days is a good time to switch to Blue Sky, because Twitter, let's face it, it's not the place it used to be. And when you come home tonight to your desktop computer and you open Glyphs, as you do, right? Then do run the update one. There's 331 is going to be out later today, all right? Thank you very much, and see you around.